Right now, you are probably staring at a to-do list that never actually ends, an inbox with a handful of unread emails that have been sitting there since Tuesday, a calendar block for lunch that some meeting quietly ate, maybe a small, low-grade dread about tomorrow's 9 a.m., the one nobody wants to attend but everybody somehow has to. Underneath all of that is a question you probably never say out loud. Is this what being alive is supposed to feel like? Here's a question almost nobody actually asks. What did an ordinary day look like 300,000 years ago? Not the highlight reel, the mammoth hunts, the cave paintings, the dramatic stuff documentaries love to zoom in on, the actual forgettable, nothing special Tuesday. The answer is going to mess with how you think about your own week, because for most of human history, a day looked almost nothing like yours. In some ways, that is a genuine problem for you. And yes, before this is over, we are absolutely getting into exactly how much sleep they were getting, because it is not what you think. Here's the trap almost everyone falls into. Somewhere along the way, we all absorbed the same cartoon version of early human life, a non-stop, dawn to dusk scramble against starvation. Every hour spent hunting, gathering, or fleeing something with teeth, collapsing at night out of pure exhaustion. It is the life was nasty and brutal version, the one where prehistoric people never had a spare minute, because one spare minute meant death. It shows up in textbooks, in cartoons, in every caveman joke you have ever heard. Sound familiar? Should? It is everywhere. And it is, at best, a wild oversimplification. When anthropologists actually went and lived alongside people who still hunted and gathered for a living, in the 20th century, not the Stone Age, they came back with numbers that did not fit the story at all. We are talking about direct, hands-on food-getting time of something like 15 to 20 hours a week, not a day, a week. That is not a typo, and we will get to exactly where that number comes from and why it matters. For now, just sit with it. A lifestyle we picture as endless labor may have involved less scheduled work than an average part-time job at a coffee shop. So if they were not spending all day trying not to die, what were they actually doing with the rest of it? And what does that say about how you are spending yours? To understand where that rhythm came from, you have to go back roughly 2 million years, long before agriculture, long before cities, long before anything you would recognize as civilization. This is the era of early Homo, the genus that eventually produced us. And it is when the human body picked up one of its strangest superpowers, the ability to run. Not fast, but far. Humans are, frankly, embarrassing sprinters. A house cat can outrun you over a short distance. But over long distances, in heat, almost nothing on land can beat us. Not horses, not wolves, not antelope. Researchers Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman laid this out in a widely cited 2004 study in the journal Nature, tracing a whole toolkit of features that show up in the fossil record starting with early Homo: long, springy legs, an Achilles tendon built like a shock absorber, a ligament running down the back of the neck that keeps your head stable while everything else is bouncing, and maybe strangest of all, millions of sweat glands. More than almost any other mammal on the planet, letting humans dump heat through their skin instead of panting like a dog. Put it together and you get an animal that could chase prey for hours in the midday sun until the animal overheated and simply could not run anymore. A strategy researchers call persistence hunting. So what does 2 million years of built-in athletic engineering actually buy you? Here is why the detail matters more than it sounds like it should. A body built for occasional exhausting bursts of effort, followed by real recovery, is a completely different machine than a body built for constant, low-grade grinding. You do not sustain a marathon-capable body by running marathons every single day, which, if you have ever tried to keep a New Year's gym resolution alive past the middle of February, is a very relatable design flaw. You sustain it with rest in between. That rhythm, hard effort followed by real recovery, was not a lifestyle choice for early humans. It was built into their anatomy 2 million years before the first to-do list existed. But does any of that actually show up in how real foraging societies spent their days? It does, and the data only gets stranger from here. in 1966 at a symposium in Chicago called Man the Hunter. Anthropologist Marshall Salin stood up and said something that made a lot of his colleagues uncomfortable. He argued that hunter-gatherer societies were not scraping by on the edge of starvation at all. He called them, only half-jokingly, the original affluent society. His case leaned heavily on fieldwork done a few years earlier by anthropologist Richard Lee, who had spent time among the San people of the Kalahari Desert region of southern Africa. Lee tracked exactly how people spent their time and found that adults typically devoted somewhere around 15 to 20 hours a week to direct subsistence, hunting, tracking, digging up roots, gathering nuts. That works out to roughly 2 to 3 hours a day, 15 to 20 hours for an entire week. Does that sound like constant, desperate labor to you? This is not like comparing a long day to a short day. It is like comparing your entire work week to something you could realistically finish before lunch on a single Tuesday, with the rest of the week left over. And it was not just the Kalahari Desert. The Hadza of northern Tanzania, studied extensively by anthropologist Frank Marlowe and his colleagues over the following decades, show a similar shape, even though they live in a completely different environment, chasing different animals, gathering different plants. Hadza households typically get a majority of their calories from gathered foods, tubers, berries, baobab fruit, with meat filling in the rest whenever a hunt actually works out. Crucially, the Hadza store almost no food. Everything gets eaten or shared within days, sometimes hours. No pantry, no freezer, nothing quietly growing a second personality in the back of a drawer somewhere. So how does an economy with essentially zero storage even function without constant panic? It runs on doing enough today, not hoarding for some hypothetical tomorrow. Half a world away, in the Bolivian Amazon, the Tsimane show yet another version of the same basic pattern, splitting their time between hunting, fishing, and small-scale farming, but still organized around daily rhythms rather than the kind of relentless, scheduled output a modern job demands. Health researchers who have tracked the Tsimane for years have found something else worth mentioning here. Despite having no access to modern medicine, they show remarkably low rates of the blood pressure and artery problems that plague industrialized populations, fitness levels most gym members would envy, and plenty of them living well into their 70s and 80s. The San worked in short, task-based bursts. The Hadza worked in short, task-based bursts. The Tsimane worked in short, task-based bursts. 3 societies, 3 continents, no meaningful contact with each other for tens of thousands of years, and somehow the same underlying shape kept showing up. Coincidence? Researchers do not think so. So what filled the rest of the day? This is where it gets genuinely strange. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner published a study comparing daytime conversations to nighttime, firelit ones among the San, and the difference was not subtle. Daytime talk, she found, was mostly practical, complaints, logistics. Gossip used to quietly enforce social norms. Who took too much meat, who was not pulling their weight, basically a Stone Age group chat. Firelight talk was a different animal entirely. Once the sun went down and people gathered around the fire, conversation shifted almost completely towards stories, myths, memories of the distant past, tales about people 2 or 3 social circles removed. The fire was not just for warmth or for cooking dinner. It was extending the usable day into something with an entirely different job, building shared imagination, repairing social friction from earlier, and passing culture down without a single book, school, or PowerPoint slide involved. Which means the hours they were not foraging were not empty hours, and the fire that let them stay up past dark simply handed them more of exactly that kind of time. Put those 2 facts together, and what you get looks less like survival mode with some downtime bolted on, and a lot more like a full social and cultural life that was built in as the default, not squeezed in as a reward for finishing your chores. Now, you would assume all that firelit evening time, no electricity, no screens, nothing to do after dark except talk, must have meant they were sleeping far more than we do, right? Here's the part we promised earlier. In 2015, sleep researcher Jerome Siegel and his team at UCLA strapped activity tracking wristbands onto members of 3 different pre-industrial societies, the Hadza, the San, and the Tsimane, and measured exactly how much they actually slept. The result surprised almost everyone in the field. Average sleep across all 3 groups came out to somewhere between 5.7 and 7.1 hours a night, right around 6.5 hours on average. That is not more than the modern industrialized average.
If anything, it is roughly the same, sometimes less.
They fell asleep a few hours after sunset, not immediately at dark, and woke up shortly before sunrise. They rarely napped, and by the researchers' account, none of the 3 languages studied even had a native word for insomnia because the problem barely seemed to exist for them. Meanwhile, you have 3 sleep apps, a weighted blanket, and a bedtime routine longer than a skincare regimen, and you are still doom-scrolling at 1 in the morning. Rough. So where did all that leftover time actually come from, if not from reliably killing big game? Here's where it gets stranger still, because none of this leisure came from an easy relationship with hunting. Researchers who have followed Hadza men on actual hunts describe big game hunting as fundamentally unreliable, something no amount of skill can fully control, meaning most hunting trips for large animals end in nothing at all. The dramatic mammoth takedown image that dominates our cultural imagination was, for most people on most days, the exception, not the rule. The dependable calories, the ones that kept a camp fed on an average Tuesday, mostly came from gathering, an activity culturally coded as unglamorous, often done by women and children, and almost never the thing that gets turned into a cave painting. The steady, reliable engine of daily survival was never the dramatic one. It rarely is, but here's the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind by now. If all of this sounds suspiciously relaxing, why does caveman still mean exhausted and desperate in basically every cartoon ever made? Here is where the timeline gets messy in an honest way. That famous 15 to 20 hour figure only counted direct food acquisition, the actual hunting, tracking, and digging. It did not count food processing, cracking nuts, pounding roots, butchering meat, making and repairing tools, hauling water, or watching children, all of which take real time and real effort. When later researchers, including Lee himself, added those hours back in, the total climbed to somewhere around 40 to 44 hours a week. That is not a non-stop grind, but it is also not the endless leisure the popular version of this story likes to suggest. It is, honestly, close to a standard work week minus the standing meetings that could have been an email. So which is it? Relentless toil or endless vacation?
Neither exactly.
There are 2 completely independent reasons the simple version does not survive contact with the full data. One, the headline number everyone quotes, was quietly leaving out several categories of real labor. 2, hunter-gatherer is not one lifestyle. It is thousands of them, and a forager in a resource-rich desert oasis had a wildly different daily reality than one working the edge of an ice sheet, where a single bad week could mean starvation. Put those together, and the honest picture is not constant misery, and it is not endless vacation either. It is something closer to a similar total workload to what a lot of people carry today, just organized completely differently, spread through the day in short, varied tasks, rather than concentrated into one unbroken block that leaves you flattened by 6 p.m. So how much of this can we actually trust? Let's pause here and address the skeptic in the room, because it is a fair point and it deserves respect. Nobody has a time machine. We cannot clock the actual hours of a real Pleistocene human, meaning someone alive during the last ice age, 80,000 years ago. Everything in this video is built from 2 imperfect sources standing in for people who left no written record: modern hunter-gatherer societies and physical traces in the ground. Both come with real caveats. The Living Society's researchers have studied the Hadza, the San, the Tsimane are not frozen time capsules. They live in the 21st century in specific modern environments, often in the harshest, most marginal land left over after millennia of farming states and colonial expansion claimed the fertile ground first. Their daily rhythms tell us something real about how humans can live without agriculture or industry, but they are not a perfect rerun of a hunter-gatherer band living in a resource-rich valley 50,000 years ago. Meanwhile, the archaeological evidence, stone tools, hearths, butchered animal bones, tells us what people were doing, but almost never how many hours a day they spent doing it. And Lee's original numbers themselves have been picked apart by other anthropologists who point out his sample only covered a few weeks, not a full year. and that during the driest season, some of the women he studied were walking 10 to 15 miles for food, which does not sound especially leisurely. So treat the specific hour counts in this video the way you would treat any estimate built from limited data, as a reasonable, well-supported range, not a stopwatch reading. What holds up is not any single number. It is the pattern that keeps showing up across genuinely independent lines of evidence. Time studies, sleep studies, the archaeology of fire, all pointing in the same rough direction. Substantial daily rest and social time, not as a rare luxury, but as a regular, structural part of how these societies actually ran. Here is the uncomfortable part of the story. The part that does not get a joke attached to it. If foraging life really did include this much daily rest, what changed? Around 12,000 years ago, in what is usually called the agricultural revolution, humans in multiple regions of the world independently began farming instead of foraging. It is almost always taught as a story of progress. More food, more people, the beginning of everything we now call civilization. The skeletons tell a quieter, sadder version of that story. Bioarchaeologists, scientists who study ancient health by examining skeletons, have compared human remains from before and after the shift to farming, and found again and again that early farmers were shorter, had worse teeth, more infections, and more skeletal signs of physical stress than the foragers who came before them in the same regions. One influential analysis, first published in 1984 and repeatedly confirmed since, found declining health in 19 out of 21 societies studied across the transition to agriculture. In parts of Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean, researchers estimate early farmers ended up something like 10 centimeters shorter, on average, than the hunter-gatherers who had lived on the same land before them. Working hours climb too. A field does not tend itself. Crops need daily, dawn-to-dusk attention that no amount of firelight storytelling was ever going to replace. There is a second, quieter loss layered underneath the first one. The very societies researchers study today for comparison, the desert-dwelling San, the forest and tundra peoples pushed to the margins of continent after continent, largely ended up on the harshest land left over precisely because expanding farming states and later colonial and industrial powers claimed the richest land for themselves first. Which means the daily rhythm this video has been describing is not even the best version of what once existed.
It is what survived on land nobody else wanted.
An older way of organizing a day did not disappear because it failed. In a lot of places it was pushed out, so here is the single idea underneath everything in this video. The human body and the human brain were not built for constant, unbroken output. They were built for something closer to what you just heard. Real bursts of purposeful effort, threaded through with genuine rest, unstructured time, and other people. Not as a reward you earn after the real work is done.
As the baseline.
As the default setting, the whole system was designed around 2 million years before anyone invented a calendar, a deadline, or a performance review. Somewhere in the last few centuries, and especially in the last few decades, that default got quietly overwritten. Busyness became a virtue you perform instead of a burden you survive. Rest became something you have to earn, schedule, and often feel guilty about taking. The 9 to 5, stretched further by a phone that never really lets you clock out, is not some ancient, hardwired pattern reasserting itself. It is a genuinely recent invention, newer than agriculture, let alone the 2-million-year-old body still running underneath it. Your afternoon slump is not weakness. Your craving to just sit around with people you like, doing nothing productive, is not laziness. Both are an old rhythm quietly asking to be let back in.
What would it look like to actually believe that?
The fact that a video asking what cavemen did all day sounds like idle procrastination, the kind of thing you would only click on while avoiding your own to-do list, might be the whole point. Maybe that instinct is the last surviving trace of the very rhythm this video has been describing. So let's come back to that inbox. Those unread emails are still sitting there. The meeting probably still ate your lunch. Tomorrow's 9 a.m. has not cancelled itself, but you now know something the version of you from a few minutes ago did not. That schedule, the one that runs from alarm to inbox to meeting and back to inbox again, is not what your species spent most of its 300,000 years doing.
It is an extremely recent invention wearing a very old body.
For most of human history, a normal day held held real work. Real food, real danger sometimes, and also real unstructured hours, gathering, talking, resting, telling stories by a fire that had no other job that night except keeping people warm and keeping them talking. You are allowed to want some version of that back.
Not the danger.
Not the diet, just the shape of the day, work in real bursts, rest that is not negotiated for, and time with people that has no agenda attached to it at all. Rest is not a modern invention. It is the original setting. You did not lose that rhythm. You just misplaced the fire. So, what would your actual day look like if you stripped it down to only what your body and your brain really needed? Let me know in the comments. Until then, see you soon.